Robert the doll. Let's start with Annabelle's little brother. Despite its harmless appearance, there are a lot of urban legends and small-town horror stories about it. This rag sailor is known to all fans of mysticism and horror films. After all, Baby Robert is the real basis for many movie stories about strange dolls. For example, about the legendary Chucky. How did he end up in a museum window? Who created it and when? What kind of letters are pasted everywhere? Is it a dog or a lion? Although I don't have an answer to this question, there are two versions of the origin of this cursed doll. In the first, a strange toy was presented to the child, apparently, by the same strange grandfather who made it himself. But I doubt that my grandfather did not love his little grandson so much to present a mystical gift. The second version says that this sailor was given by a dark-skinned nanny to her ward Robert Otto, who was called Jean by his middle name in the family. They say that the child's parents somehow offended the maid from the Bahamas and she cursed the toy and gave it to the owner's son. The child liked the gift so much that he gave him his own name Robert. For some time, young Otto did not part with his new friend. The residents of the house heard the boy talking to the doll, but attributed it to children's fantasies. However, the father began to doubt that everything was normal when, passing by the boy's bedroom, he suddenly heard that a completely unfamiliar and creepy voice was answering the questions asked by his son's familiar and native voice. Over time, more and more strange things began to manifest themselves. There were constant problems with the light, servants heard children's footsteps in the corridors of the house, and neighbors saw how the doll moved from one window to another when no one was at home. One day, the Otto couple, once again faced with pranks with the light, decided to punish little Jean. Thinking that these were the tricks of the boy, they swore that at the moment when they were scolding their son, they heard the giggling of the doll and saw a small shadow running down the corridor. Young Jean kept waking up from nightmares. Then the nightmares came out of the dream into reality. Objects were falling in the room, there was a rumble, massive things were moving. When the parents came running to the noise and screams of the child, he shouted to them, "Robert did it. Robert did it." The doll was taken to the attic. But it didn't help much. The servants saw the little shadow moving around the house again. The household even encountered Robert outside the windows of the second floor. A plumber who was fixing pipes in Otto's house ran away in a panic, claiming that he heard children's laughter when the owner's son was not around, and then saw the doll moving around the house by itself. Jean grew up, went to study and became an artist, found a wife. When his father passed away, Robert Jean Otto returned to his childhood home. There he met his old friend again in the attic. Jean decided that he had long outgrown the whole nightmare associated with the doll and brought Robert's doll to his office. There he put the sailor in the window. Otto's wife initially found the toy very creepy, but her husband convinced her that it was just a doll, nothing more. Soon the sailor began to manifest himself again. People from the street could see Robert's doll perfectly, and after a short time, passers-by began to avoid this place. Neighbors passing by the window claimed that the toy Robert was following them with his eyes, and many even claimed that they saw the sailor moving around the office. The guests who came to Cott's house also heard children's laughter and the running of small feet along the corridors of the big house. His wife was most afraid of the doll, because she was often alone with him. She said that he walks around the house, moves things, scares her with laughter and whispers, and even pushes her down the stairs. One day, when Jean left, his wife decided to say goodbye to the toy, putting it back where he was earlier, to the attic. When Jean returned home, he was angry that Robert had been removed from his seat. The artist said that the doll should have its own bright room. At that moment, Mrs. Sada decided that her husband had simply gone mad. However, soon Jean himself got tired of the doll's influence and the endless presence of the sinister toy. Otto had already put his old friend in the attic himself. But even there the ragged sailor trampled, ran, whispered and even giggled. In 1974, when Eugene Robert Otto passed away, his wife sold the house along with the doll that was left in the attic. The new family lived and did not think about what was stored in boxes from past owners. The neighbors in the town stopped creating noise and fuss around the house, and the Robert doll subsided for a while. One day, the 10-year-old daughter of the new owners decided to look for something interesting in the boxes left over from past residents, and found a big rag sailor. For some reason, she liked him very much and the girl decided that they would become friends. However, the baby regretted it very quickly, because, according to the girl, even after many years, Robert showed himself unfriendly, and one night he attacked the child at all when she was sleeping in her bed. After this family, a woman Myrtle Ryder moved into the ill-fated house. She turned out to be a woman with the rest of her nerves and lived with the doll for 20 years. According to Myrtle, Robert was constantly moving around the house, stomping at night, whispering, giggling, but did not show aggression towards her. As a result, Mrs. Ryder got tired of the noisy neighbor and decided to donate it to the Fort East Martell Museum. Museum workers took the unusual doll, not believing in the words of obsession, and put it in storage. However, people found out about the doll and began to write letters to the museum addressed to Robert himself. In the end, the museum staff gave up and put up a mystical exhibit in the hall. Now the Robert doll is sitting in a glass case, it is practically not removed from there, and visitors in droves circle around the doll and hope to catch her eye or at least some movement. Many people, by the way, say that near Robert's doll, their cameras and electronic devices fail. Since 1994, take a mandatory rule at the Key West Museum. Ask for permission to take photos with a famous exhibit. Many tragic cases are described in the museum's showcase. Those who did not ask permission from either the workers or the doll got into accidents and difficult life situations. Elmo. I can't miss such an interesting lot. Alma. This is a character from the popular children's show Sesame Street. In the 1990s, the show was at the peak of popularity all over the world. And, of course, the toys of the heroes were released and sold out in all corners of the earth. The mother of 10-year-old James Bone gave such a plush Elm to her son on his birthday. The toy had the ability to record and was programmed so that the child could give the plush Elma his name and he addressed him individually. The fluffy red monster cheerfully shouted "Hello, James," when the boy took him in his arms and pressed on his stomach. After a while, Alma started shouting James' name just like that when no one was touching him. This scared both the mother and the child, but they decided that perhaps it was a manufacturing defect. But when one night Elna started shouting "Kill James," then the seriously frightened boy and his mother threw him away. And here is a possible solution to this mystical event. After hearing this story, I remembered a toy from my childhood, a parrot with the possibility of recording. Like all children, I was exploring the world and was interested in what and how it works inside. So, the parrot turned out to have two modules. In one, the words that are provided are recorded, but in the second there was a dictaphone. I think Velma had the same system. Obviously, there was some kind of malfunction in the recording module, so Alma could shout out the boy's name just like that. I also had a parrot, from which I had to pull out the batteries. But about the cries of "die," James is also quite understandable. The word "hi" and "die" sounds very similar. Baila Baby. This is the scariest doll for today. It was created in 1922 in the small town of Key West, which is located in Florida, USA. The father and creator of this mystical thing was a mysterious and surrounded by secrets and rumors man named Charles Wilcox. Wilcox was a member of the Order, one of the most mysterious and mystical in the early 20th century. Golden Dawn. It consisted of such famous personalities shrouded in a dark aura as Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, Howard Lovecraft, who created many creepy works about ancient demons and gods, the father of Scientology, Lafayette Hubbard, and many other equally unusual characters of the gossip columns. This cult of the alchemist was headed by a sorcerer known as the Beast of the Apocalypse, Aleister Crowley. Charles Wilcox worked for some time at the Madame Tussauds Museum, where he perfected the skill of making figures. It was said that Mr. Wilcox's doll had magical properties. They scared off death by raising hopelessly ill people to their feet. It was because of this skill that the Quincox came with a request for help to the desperate wife of McNee. Their little daughter Rosie suffered from anemia. The doctors couldn't help the poor thing. The puppeteer accepted the order and created a cute figure with a soft body and wax arms, legs and head. He dressed his new job in a silk dress with lace and handed it to the girl's parents. 2 days after that, the girl died in agony. She didn't even have time to name the doll, but she died clutching the new toy tightly. The parents blamed the incident on Wilcox. They believed that the puppeteer had killed their daughter with poison. The master was forced to flee and hide. Little Rosie was buried with the doll. But some time later, when the police needed evidence in the investigation and had to exhume the body, the doll was not in the coffin. 12 years have passed, but does this ease the pain in the heart of parents who have lost their child? And so Rosie's mother, Vanessa McNee, saw a doll in an antique store that looked very much like her late daughter's last toy. The woman bought a toy and from that moment her life turned into a nightmare. Strange things were happening in the house, misfortune, and it all ended with the fact that in 1952, Mrs. McNee stepped out of the window, clutching the ill-fated doll to her chest. People who ran up to her, who wanted to help, told her that she was muttering, both "Baila Baby, Baila Baby." So the doll got its name. In 1969, an occult boom began in the United States. Having a reputation as a cursed house, the McNee house became the site of a new museum, where the main exhibit, of course, was a sinister ageless girl with a rag body in a dress made of frayed Chinese silk. Unknown people tried to burn her twice, but she still survived the fire. And in 1995, Baila Baby was kidnapped, and the owner of the museum promised the finder $10,000. But Baila Baby never returned home. In 1998, the doll was bought from the satanic sect Number of Animals in New York by an American journalist, who in turn resold it to the one who owns it now. I'm writing to Vlad Tau. The doll was brought to Moscow, where it was on display at the Moscow Museum of Magic, Occultism and Superstition. The museum existed in Moscow for a very short time and was closed due to the crisis. All the exhibits were safely shipped to Prague, where they remain to this day. Perhaps this is just a coincidence, but soon the journalist who gave Tau a doll died under very strange circumstances. The doll has been checked by the Bureau of Expert Professor Specialist Sergei Lazarev, specializing in antiques expertise, confirmed the age of the baby. X-ray of the wax skull showed that there is a piece of parchment with incomprehensible signs. Perhaps it was a master's autograph or a magic spell. The doll's body turned out to be stuffed with human hair and rags with traces of blood. As it turned out, there is a mystical historical reference to this. Some people were convinced that the sinister puppeteer Charles Wincox created dolls in the image of deceased children from the St. Augustine orphanage, and in these sinister toys, he used the hair and fragments of clothing of deceased orphans. The owner of Byla Baby claims that the doll behaves calmly, although some are horrified by one of her looks. Domestic cats are also afraid of Byla Baby. They run away from the toy and hiss at it. Vlad Topish keeps Byla Baby in a special way, wrapped in a funeral towel. He claims that every time he takes it out, a chill runs down his back, and there is an invisible presence of someone nearby. Also, despite the age of the sinister doll, she still smells of spices and fragrant perfumes. Vlad says that maybe the doll is sleeping now, saving up strength to take someone to the Valley of Shadows next. Although maybe she finally calmed down and became just a creepy toy.